The morning the little girl collapsed in the middle of the crowded city park, everyone froze. Some people reached for their phones. Others whispered and watched from a distance. Only one man dropped everything, ran across the grass, and scooped the frightened child into his arms without caring about the dirt on his clothes or the curious eyes surrounding him. At that exact moment, a sleek black luxury car stopped beside the park. A woman in a tailored business suit stepped out, her calm expression breaking into panic as she recognized the child. Neither of them realized that this desperate moment would change both their lives forever and lead to a question that neither had ever imagined hearing. Before we begin this emotional journey, please take a moment to like this video, leave a comment telling us if you believe kindness always finds its way back, share this story with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to Heart Kindness Tales for more unforgettable stories about compassion, healing, and second chances. The man was Rowan Mercer, a 36-year-old widowed father who had learned long ago that life rarely rewarded good people quickly. Every morning before sunrise, he prepared breakfast for his 8-year-old daughter, packed her school lunch, and hurried to his maintenance job at an old apartment complex. His hands were rough from years of repairing broken pipes, cracked walls, and damaged roofs, yet he never complained because those hands were also the ones that braided his daughter's hair when she insisted she wanted to look special for school. Rowan had lost his wife to a sudden illness 4 years earlier, and ever since that painful day, he had carried both grief and responsibility on his shoulders. Money was always tight, bills seemed endless, and sleep rarely lasted through the night, but he never allowed his daughter to see how exhausted he truly was. To her, he remained the strongest person in the world. The little girl Rowan had rescued was named Ivy. She had wandered away from her nanny while chasing butterflies through the park before suffering a severe allergic reaction that left her struggling to breathe. The elegant woman who rushed from the luxury car was Celeste Hawthorne, one of the youngest CEOs in the country and leader of a billion-dollar technology company. Newspapers often described her as cold, brilliant, and impossible to impress. Investors admired her confidence, competitors feared her determination, and employees respected the impossible standards she set. Yet behind every magazine cover and television interview was a woman carrying invisible heartbreak. She had built an empire while silently mourning the family she never had. After losing both parents in her 20s and sacrificing personal relationships for business success, she had become surrounded by wealth but haunted by loneliness. Rowan stayed beside Ivy until the ambulance arrived, refusing every offer of recognition. Once the child was stable, he quietly turned to leave because he still had work waiting and another paycheck he could not afford to lose. Celeste stopped him only long enough to thank him sincerely. She asked for his name so she could repay him somehow, but Rowan politely smiled and insisted that saving a child was simply what any decent person should do. He disappeared into the crowd before she could ask anything more. For the first time in years, someone had helped her expecting absolutely nothing in return. That unexpected kindness lingered in her thoughts long after the ambulance doors closed. Days passed, yet Celeste found herself unable to forget the humble father whose worn jacket had been stained with grass as he protected her niece. She instructed her assistant to locate him, not because she intended to reward him with money, but because she wanted to understand how someone living such an ordinary life possessed extraordinary compassion. When she finally found Rowan repairing broken steps outside an aging apartment building, she noticed that every elderly resident greeted him warmly, children waved excitedly, and neighbors trusted him completely. He seemed richer in genuine relationships than many executives she knew who owned private jets. Celeste offered Rowan a consulting position overseeing maintenance for several charitable housing projects funded by her company. The salary was far better than anything he had earned before, but what convinced him to accept was the chance to improve living conditions for struggling families like his own. Slowly, their professional relationship grew into an unexpected friendship. Rowan admired that Celeste never treated workers with disrespect despite her immense success. Celeste admired that Rowan measured people not by wealth or status but by honesty and kindness. As months passed, they were seen together more frequently. They visited housing sites, inspected community centers, and attended charity events. Rowan always felt awkward wearing borrowed suits while standing beside one of the country's most recognizable business leaders. Whenever photographers pointed cameras toward them, he instinctively stepped aside, believing he did not belong in her world. One afternoon, after another public event filled with whispers and curious glances, Rowan laughed nervously and quietly remarked that she should be careful because people would think they were together. The words escaped almost as a joke, born from embarrassment rather than hope. Celeste looked directly into his eyes with a gentle smile that softened years of guarded confidence. She simply wondered whether that would really be such a bad thing. The question followed Rowan everywhere. He dismissed it repeatedly, convincing himself that someone like Celeste deserved a polished executive, not a widowed maintenance supervisor with overdue bills and faded work boots. Every insecurity he had buried resurfaced. He worried that people would accuse him of chasing her fortune or exploiting her generosity. Meanwhile, Celeste faced criticism from business partners who believed friendships with ordinary employees damaged her carefully crafted public image. Newspapers speculated endlessly, social media spread rumors, and board members privately encouraged her to distance herself from Rowan before gossip affected investor confidence. Neither of them realized that the person watching everything most carefully was Rowan's daughter, Nora. She noticed something her father could not. For the first time since her mother's passing, he laughed without forcing it. He smiled more often, returned home less burdened by sadness, and seemed hopeful about tomorrow. Nora also noticed the warmth in Celeste's eyes whenever she looked at her father, a kindness very different from the confident executive the television always portrayed. Instead of fearing change, Nora quietly wished that happiness might finally return to their small family. Life, however, rarely allows peace without another test. A devastating fire broke out one stormy afternoon inside one of the affordable housing complexes Rowan supervised. Despite emergency crews racing toward the scene, Rowan entered the smoke-filled building after hearing cries from an elderly resident trapped on the upper floor. Ignoring every danger, he guided two frightened children and the elderly woman safely outside moments before part of the roof collapsed behind them. Television cameras captured everything. Across the city, Celeste watched the breaking news in horror, rushing to the hospital with tears streaming down her face for the first time in years. Rowan survived with burns, exhaustion, and weeks of recovery ahead. Sitting beside his hospital bed, Celeste finally understood how deeply he had changed her life. His courage reminded her that success meant very little without people worth sharing it with. She had spent years building skyscrapers while neglecting the simple human connections that gave life meaning. Watching Rowan sleep peacefully despite his injuries, she realized she no longer feared public opinion. She feared only the possibility of never telling him how important he had become. When Rowan finally opened his eyes, he saw Celeste beside him holding Nora's hand. The little girl smiled brighter than she had in years because, for the first time since losing her mother, she felt surrounded by genuine love instead of quiet loneliness. Recovery was slow, but every difficult therapy session became easier because neither Celeste nor Nora allowed Rowan to face it alone. Their growing bond became impossible to ignore. Several months later, Celeste made an announcement that surprised the entire business community. She established a foundation dedicated to providing safe housing, education, and emergency assistance for struggling single parents. Instead of naming the foundation after herself, she named it after Rowan's late wife, honoring the woman whose memory had inspired years of quiet sacrifice and unwavering love. Rowan stood speechless during the ceremony, overwhelmed by a gesture more valuable than any fortune. He understood then that true love honors the past rather than competing with it. The gossip that once surrounded them slowly disappeared as people witnessed the sincerity of their actions. Employees respected Celeste even more for choosing compassion over appearances. Families across the city benefited from the foundation's work. Rowan continued leading community projects, never forgetting the hardships that shaped him. Together they proved that kindness, humility, and courage could influence far more lives than wealth alone. If this story has touched your heart so far, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who believes in the power of kindness, and subscribe to Heart Kindness Tales so we can continue bringing you stories that remind us humanity is still alive.